The town of Etheridge was known for exactly one thing, and that was the annual pumpkin festival, which I always thought was a load of crap, because the pumpkins they grew there were these pale, watery things kin to gourds. My brother Danny wasn't missing back then. He was just a phone call away, a 10-minute drive away. He lived in the old Harlow place on the edge of town, a house that had been in our family for 3 generations. It was the kind of house that had a name, not an address, a Victorian pile of dark wood and sagging porches that always smelled of dust and dry rot. I was the one who'd left Etheridge for the city, got a job in digital archiving for a historical society, cataloging old photographs, letters, that kind of thing. He was the one who stayed, who kept the lawn mowed and the roof patched, who sent me pictures of the deer that came to eat his hostas. I thought I had the better deal. I was wrong. The last time I saw Danny, he was standing on his porch, waving me off. He was wearing that old flannel jacket, the one with the torn elbow, and he was holding a mug of coffee. I remember thinking how he looked older than 34, how the lines around his eyes were deep as carved wood. I pulled away, and I watched him in the rearview mirror until the house disappeared behind a curve in the gravel drive. That was a Tuesday. By Thursday, he wasn't answering his phone. By Friday, the sheriff's department was calling me, asking if I'd heard from him. He hadn't shown up for work at the lumber yard, his truck was still in the driveway, and the front door was unlocked. The house was empty. The coffee mug was still on the porch, and there was a half-eaten plate of toast in the kitchen, the bread stale and crumbling. There was no sign of a struggle. His wallet was on the nightstand, his keys in the truck. They found his phone dead on the charger in the living room. It was like he'd just evaporated. The search parties covered the woods for miles. They brought in dogs, then a helicopter from the state police. Nothing. It was the kind of disappearance that made the regional news, the one with the grainy footage of our parents and me, haggard and pleading into a camera. For 6 months, I lived in a state of suspended animation. I kept his house clean. I answered the calls from well-meaning strangers. I learned to hate the sound of the phone ringing. The lead detective, a man named Calhoun, was a good guy. He told me in that gentle, practiced way police have that sometimes adults just walk away. They start new lives. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Danny wasn't the type to walk away. He was the type to fix things. A year passed. The case went cold. The flyers with his face faded on the bulletin boards, and people in town started looking at me with a kind of pity that was worse than suspicion. I moved back into the Harlow place, needing to be close to him. I told myself it was for the search, but really I think I just wanted to hear the floorboards creak the same way they did when he was there. It was a Sunday evening in late October, with the wind rattling the old window panes when I found it. I was in the attic, going through a box of our father's things that I'd never had the heart to open. Tax returns, old work gloves, a box of fishing lures, and beneath that, a stack of photographs. They weren't in an album, just loose, bound with a thick rubber band that snapped when I touched it. The top photo was of my great-grandfather, standing in front of a Model T. The next was of the house being built, the skeletal frame of it against a gray sky. I flipped through them slowly, letting the dust motes dance in the beam of my flashlight. They were mostly the same thing, this house, this land, generations of my family standing in front of it, staring at the camera with that flat, unreadable look of people from 100 years ago. And then I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. In the middle of the stack was a photograph of a man I didn't recognize. He was standing in front of the Harlow place, but the house looked different. The porch was newer, the paint a shade of white it hadn't been in my lifetime. The man was tall, gaunt, wearing clothes that looked like they were from the 1940s or 50s. He had one arm resting on the porch railing, and his face was turned slightly, looking not at the camera but past it, as if he was watching something to his left. I stared at his face, and a cold feeling like ice water in my veins spread through my chest. It wasn't a resemblance to anyone I knew. It was something else. It was the way he was standing, the way his weight was shifted onto his left leg, a posture so specific, so familiar that it made the back of my neck prickle. It was Danny's posture, exactly Danny's posture. I turned the photo over. On the back in faded pencil was a date. September 14, 1953, and a name. D.J. Harlow. Danny's name. My brother's name was Daniel James Harlow, D.J. Harlow. I thought it was a coincidence, a chilling one, but a coincidence nonetheless. Maybe a distant relative I'd never heard of. A great-uncle, a cousin. I spent the next few hours scouring my family records, the old Bibles, the genealogy charts my mother had kept. There was no D.J. Harlow in 1953. The only Harlow in the house at that time was my great-great-aunt, an unmarried woman named Edith. The man in the photograph was an impossibility. I tried to tell myself the pencil marking was faint, that it could be something else, a date, a misread. But I knew what I saw. The name was clear. The next few weeks were a slow spiral. I spent my nights in that attic, going through every box, every photo album. I found another photo, this one from the 1970s. A man again in front of the house, again with that same posture, that same weight on his left leg. This time he was holding a shotgun and the face was different, but the eyes, the set of the jaw. It was the same feeling. I turned it over. Written in ballpoint pen, faded but legible, was a name. D. Harlow, and a date. July 8, 1975. There was no D. Harlow who lived in this house in 1975. There was no D. Harlow who had ever lived in this house, as far as I could tell. The house was built by my great-great-grandparents and had passed down a single unbroken chain of eldest sons. And every one of their names was accounted for, except for these. I started to feel watched. It was a primal thing, a twitch between my shoulder blades that made me lock the doors I'd never locked before. I'd be washing dishes at the kitchen sink, looking out at the dark yard, and I'd feel it. A presence. As if something was standing just at the edge of the tree line, observing me. I'd whip my head around, but there would be nothing there, just the black shapes of the oaks swaying in the wind. The house itself began to feel different. The air was heavier. The sounds, the creaks and groans of a settling house took on a new quality. They weren't random. They seemed to be following a pattern, a slow, deliberate perambulation from room to room. I tried to call Calhoun, but I didn't know what to tell him. Hey, I found a picture of my brother's ghost from 1953. I couldn't. I started taking photographs of my own. It was a compulsion, a need to document the present, to try and outsignal the past. I took pictures of the kitchen, the living room, the stairs. The images on the digital screen were fine, but it was the prints that were the problem. I had an old inkjet printer, and when I printed a shot I'd taken of the hallway, the photograph came out blurry, a smear of light at the end of the corridor. I cleaned the printhead, ran a test, and tried again. The same thing. A faint humanoid shape, indistinct, like a double exposure of a figure standing in the hall. I was alone in the house. I'd checked. And in the flash of the photo, I'd seen my reflection in the mirror at the end of that hall, saw myself holding the camera. I was in the foreground. The smear was behind me. The last thing I did, the thing I did tonight, was set up a tripod in the living room. I wanted to take a picture of the old fireplace where Danny and I used to build fires as kids. I set the timer, the little red light blinking, and I walked over to the fireplace, standing beside the mantel for scale. The camera clicked, the flash went off, blinding me for a moment. I hurried over, checking the small screen on the back. The image was of the fireplace, the mantel, the room behind me, and me. I was in the photo, but I wasn't alone. Standing behind me, no more than a foot away, was a figure. It was dark, indistinct, but I could make out the shape of a head, the slope of shoulders. And even though I couldn't see the face, the posture was unmistakable. It was the same posture, the weight on the left leg. The head tilted as if listening. It took me a second to realize what was wrong. In the photo, my own reflection wasn't in the mirror. The mirror across the room should have shown me standing in front of the fireplace, but I wasn't there. The mirror in the photograph showed an empty room. It showed the fireplace and the chairs and the floral wallpaper. It showed everything except for me. The figure in the photo wasn't just behind me, it was me. Or rather, everything that I was, everything that Danny was, everything that all those other men were, was collected in that one dark space. It was your standard, everyday mirage. That's what I told myself, a trick of the light. But as I stood there, staring at the photograph, I heard a sound from the hallway. It wasn't a creak. It was a voice. It was Danny's voice, but it was old and thin and coming from a place far away. It was one word, my name. And when I looked up from the camera, the hallway was empty. But I knew with a certainty that went beyond logic, beyond scientific explanation, that I was no longer alone in the house, that I had somehow joined the collection, that the thing that had taken Danny was now reaching for me. And that next time someone from my family looked at the old photographs, they would see a new one. A man standing in front of the Harlow house with that same weight on his left leg. And on the back, in my own handwriting, they would find a name and a date that is yet to come.